Hallo, is anyone there? Hallo. Hello, is anybody there? Hello. Oh, you're in.
I'm in. Okay.
Well, hello. Is anyone there? Is anyone there? Hello? Can't hear you, Colin. Oh, I can see you now. Are you there, Colin? Hello? Oh, Hello, Colin? You're muted for some reason. I don't understand why.
Okay, let's try that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you do then?
So I've had to alter quite a number of settings here. And
Yeah.
because I'm now on the large computer, again, it's not detecting a camera.
Ah.
So I'll have a little search around for that in the background. Lise Revel has joined.
Oh, good. Oh, hello, Lise. Hello, Lise.
Oh, already. Hi. You won't see me. My camera is not working, I'm afraid. But I can see you. Late. The invitation has gone into my junk mail.
Ah, okay.
So I was sitting there thinking, oh, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here. Shall I ring? And then I thought, oh, I better check that it's not.
Oh, good. Thank you, Lise. You're very welcome. So we have so far Colin and Lise. Very sorry to everyone. We've had some technical problems, but we're getting there.
Right.
So Lise, can you see me?
I can see you. Yeah.
Okay, good. So you can see me and hear me fine.
Absolutely fine. Yeah.
Good. And Colin, you can see me and hear me?
Yes.
Good. But I can't see you. But that's okay. Let's run with that. Is that all right?
Yes.
Oh, we have Ian coming in. Hello, Hello, Ian. Ah, hello, Ian.
It seems that
Hi.
I
Good
Hello,
morning.
Ian.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you and see you. Good, nice.
That's good. That's good.
Good, and can you see and hear me, Ian?
Yeah, perfectly clearly now.
Okay,
It was a bit wobbly at first, but now it's perfect.
okay. Thank you so much. So now we have 3 people in the webinar. It's great to have you all. We have Colin and Ian and Lise. And I just need to take a few seconds to check that everything's okay technically before we go. Now I'm going to. Okay then. So we should all be seeing me. Is that right?
yeah,
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the first technical thing to say is then, so Ian won't have heard this. We're not going to be able to see Colin or Lise, but
Okay.
we will see Ian if he speaks. And if you'd like to speak in this webinar, that would be wonderful. And the easiest way to do that, now if you go to the top left of your screen, there's a blue icon with 3 white lines. And if you hover over that, it says chat.
mhm.
And you click on that and just write a very short, simple message. Lise to speak, Colin to speak, Ian to speak. So that prevents everyone kind of talking at the same time, potentially. Is that okay for everyone? And you can all say yes at the same time if you want.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay. So, and I, as the chair of the seminar, I'm able to bring people in, bring participants in. So I'll probably do that in order of people having written a message that they'd like to speak. So again, very welcome to what I believe is L'Arche Kent's first ever webinar. And welcome also to my home, which is where I'm sitting. And we have as our subject for today, L'Arche and faith. The question that I sent was, how do I see my involvement with L'Arche in terms of my faith? How do I see the connection between L'Arche and faith for me and for society more generally? Now, last night, as I am every Wednesday, I was at Rainbow cooking and sharing a meal with people. And I happened to see a bit of information about a seminar at the Tizard Institute at Kent University next week. A lady called Precious did some work a couple of years ago on her PhD thesis. She included L'Arche in her research, and she will be giving a lecture next week with the title, Faith Organizations Achieve Better Outcomes. So that is for the people with learning disabilities that are being supported. So our webinar rather today is in that context, really, that wider context of what is it significant that faith plays an element in L'Arche, and if so, in what way, for us as individuals and for the service, because L'Arche is a service provider, which L'Arche provides. So to lead us into this subject of L'Arche and faith, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own story around faith and around how I came to L'Arche and what faith has meant for me in terms of my involvement with L'Arche. I'm planning to speak for 10 or 15 minutes, and then it'd be great to have a wider discussion drawing each of you in. So I grew up in a religious family. I was born and brought up a Catholic. And faith was a natural part of our life, really, and going to church as a family on a Sunday was as natural as eating together in the evening. I went to Catholic school, so really until the age of 18, when I went off to university, I hadn't had a lot of contact with anyone who wasn't a Catholic. When I went to university, it was very important for me to get involved in the Catholic Society and the Catholic chaplaincy. I was very actively involved there. And that was a kind of a way of exploring my faith a bit more deeply. Also coming into contact and friendship for the first time with people of other Christian traditions. And that's something which was going to be important for me later on in terms of coming to L'Arche. It was also important for me to join a group called the St. Vincent de Paul Society through the Catholic chaplaincy. There was a student group, and we used to go visiting every week. I particularly enjoyed going to a geriatric hospital near the university campus and just sitting and chatting with people. And I found I just really enjoyed it. And I seemed to be, receiving far more than I might have been giving to these elderly people. And as an SVP student group, we used to meet together once a week, and we'd pray a bit and we'd talk about our visits. And that was an important element of what we were doing for me. So I heard about L'Arche, the Catholic chaplaincy. I went to visit L'Arche Liverpool in Advent of 1985. I spent a couple of days there. And it was a good visit. I quite enjoyed being there. But it didn't feel quite right. It didn't feel quite the right place for me. And if I can kind of rationalize it, it was almost too ordinary. It was kind of people living in a house. And I noticed that the learning disabled people went out to work during the day and the assistants stayed home and cleaned the house. And I thought, well, I don't know. I kind of, I wanted to save the world. I didn't want to kind of, just be there cleaning toilets, really. Having said that, I've been cleaning toilets this week, and whether that's saving the world or not, I have no idea, but they need to be cleaned. So I didn't go to L'Arche after university. I went to another community called Camphill, and I spent a year also in a community in Denmark. And then I was coming back to England, so I got in touch with L'Arche Kent. I was invited to come for a visit. And I remember arriving at Little Ewell. It's the house where L'Arche started in the UK. I came up to this lovely old house in the middle of the countryside. It was time for the meal, and I remember a lot about that meal. I do then. As I say, I've grown up with the importance, a sense of the importance of eating together, and I really enjoyed that first meal. It was there was a lot of people, about 20 people around the big table. I remember what we ate. It was homemade pizza. Tuna pizza. I really enjoyed the banter around the table. People from different countries, different in every way. And I thought, what an interesting bunch of people. I feel very at home here. And after the meal, as happened every evening in those days, we went through to the living room and had a time of prayer, and I found that very special as well. And then a guy picked up the guitar and started playing James Taylor songs on the guitar. And I thought, wow, that was the cherry on the icing on the cake for me. And, I knew I was not only going to come, but stay a long time. I just knew that straight away. And that was 28 years ago. I'm still here, and I'm still sitting around enjoying having meals with people. And that's something that's still really important for me. And also in terms of faith, as I've said already, I'm from the Christian tradition. I'm struck by how in the Gospels there are so many accounts of Jesus eating and drinking with people. The Gospel of Luke in particular is full of stories of Jesus eating and drinking with people. And in many cases, it's the people that nobody else wanted to eat and drink with. The people who were in some ways, for some reason, on the margins of their society. And yet those are the people that Jesus seemed to have particularly enjoyed eating and drinking with. And I'm very struck by what was the very first miracle that Jesus performed. It was to produce more wine so that a couple could have a great party for their wedding. So the wedding feast at Cana, and after which one of our L'Arche Kent houses is named. There's also a nice image. Jesus in the Gospels says often, the kingdom of heaven is like ... Jesus uses various images. One of them is a wedding feast that a king organised for the wedding of his son. This is in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22. And he says it's like a wedding feast where the king invites kind of, the well-known, the rich and the powerful. They don't turn up. So he says to the servants, well, go out into the streets and just pull in all kinds of people, bring them to this wedding feast, and make sure they dress up well. It's a celebration, and celebrations are good and important. Now, moving on a bit, as I say, I was at Rainbow last night, enjoying the great celebration of a meal, which is still a great joy for me. I cook with my friend Denise every Wednesday, and we enjoy cooking together. We enjoy serving a meal and eating with people, having a time of singing and prayer afterwards. Pretty much just like happened on my first visit 28 years ago. That's still happening on Wednesday evenings at Rainbow. And another thing that's special about Denise for me, and again, it's very kind of biblical, really. Denise, for some reason, refers to almost all men as John. So, with the exception of two people. So, for example, Colin, who is part of this webinar, is referred to as John by Denise. Denise will often say to us, "I want to go to John's house." Or she'll say, "Party at John's house." And she does go to quite often to her good friends, Colin and Maria, for a meal. There are two men that she doesn't call John. One is her brother-in-law, so her sister's husband, who she calls Mike, which is his name, and me, who she calls Eddie. And it's really lovely to be kind of called by name by somebody. And I've heard this said by many people in L'Arche. When somebody calls you by your name for the first time, there's something very profound about that, about being called and called by name. It's something that Jesus does in the Gospels. We hear that he calls the guys who were the fishers, the fishermen. Matthew, put down your nets and come and follow me. Or he says to this Zacchaeus, this little guy who was up in a tree, "Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. I'm coming to your house today." So he calls us by name, as Denise calls me by my name, and it's something very special about that. There's also in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 43. This is one of the readings at our wedding, Imsun and I, and it's "Do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine." I'm going to kind of make a little link there with the "do not be afraid." I'm going to say a little bit about suffering, because suffering is a part of our world, and it's part of L'Arche, and it's a reality for each other. So we there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of celebration in L'Arche, and there's a lot of suffering, and it's just it's something that exists. And I don't want to spiritualize that or rationalize that particularly in any way, just to name that it exists in our world, in L'Arche, and for each of us. For me, it might be in the pure ordinariness of some of my day-to-day existence, in life and in L'Arche. One of the things that really drives me up the wall is people walking slowly. I have to walk quite a lot with people to various places, and it's amazing how slow some of the people in L'Arche walk, and it kills me. I like to kind of, I'm quite an active person. I like to kind of keep moving, get to the next place, and some people are just so slow, and it kills me sometimes. It's not in the grand scale of suffering in the world, and children getting bombed in Aleppo. It's probably not a big thing, but it's one of the little crosses which I have to bear, as is, some people just saying the same thing over and over again, or asking the same question. The little crosses, so I should be thankful that they're not bigger crosses. So I just kind of offer that as, that's another part of our reality, and how does that, what does that mean in terms of our faith? I'm not exactly sure, and I'm not going to, I'm just going to offer that as a kind of a question. Yeah, and kind of perhaps one little link is that prayer is important for me. I've always, as long as I can remember, prayed several times a day. I sing the Psalms every day. I sit in silence for a period of time in the morning, and sometimes there's not a lot happening. Nothing happening, and there's a sense that I just need to be there and be faithful to that nothing happening, in the hope that maybe something is happening somehow, somewhere with somebody. And I'll just finish my little presentation with a little reading which I often read at the start of talks I gave about L'Arche in the past. It's from St. Paul, from the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, and where Paul uses the image of a church, uses the image of a body to describe church. And I'm going to read some of that. So Paul writes, Christ is like a single body with its many limbs and organs, which, many as they are, together make up one body. A body is not a single organ, but many. Suppose the foot were to say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body. It belongs to the body nonetheless. Suppose the ear were to say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body. It still belongs to the body. If the body were all eye, how could it hear? If the body were all ear, how could it smell? But in fact, God appointed each limb and organ to its own place in the body as he chose. If the whole were a single organ, there would not be a body at all. In fact, however, there are many different organs, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I do not need you, or the head to the feet, I do not need you. Quite the contrary. Those parts of the body which seem to be more frail than others are indispensable, and those parts of the body which we regard as less honourable are treated with special honour. So I will finish my little introduction there, and then it will be great if we can open up now for general discussion. So who would like to go first out of Colin, Ian and Lise?
I don't mind going first. It's Ian.
That's Ian. Yeah, I'll click on you, Ian. Okay, bringing you in.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna. I think my camera's on now. Is it? Can you see me?
I can see you.
Yeah, thanks. It's really nice to hear your reflections. Yeah. So spirituality and L'Arche. Well, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, and on the suffering thing, perhaps going from back to front. I think I spoke to Lise yesterday. We had a chat, and we talked about how for me, L'Arche seems to magnify a lot of things, and one thing is the sufferings or the small crosses I bear, and the and frailty. It's like a magnifying glass where they're brought to the fore, and it's wonderful because it just gives me a chance to not walk away from them and to look at them. So, for example, judgments, judging other people, and well, last night we were having dinner, and we sung a beautiful hymn before dinner. John was here and he was singing, and I just realized during the hymn and afterwards that a completely different context for looking at certain people in the group exists outside of my context and my judgment of it, and it was almost came like a shock. It was almost like being plunged into water, and you know, that was my idea, and this is something else entirely. And how can you deal with that now, or how can you integrate that? So yeah, the way that I was judging things, I noticed there's a completely other way of judging it. I can't really describe without revealing some kind of personal things about members, but it was just that shift of context, which is painful at first, and that's a kind of suffering, a release of my positionalities that I have, you know, in everyday life, but at L'Arche it seems to be magnified, and it's great because it's like somehow, yeah, this opportunity to look at things differently is really wonderful, and I think that's part of my spiritual experience, and it's part of why I wanted to come to L'Arche. And I think you mentioned being called by your name. I really value that when that happens as well. And I think being seen as well, it's for me important thing. And I hope that I'm offering something to the core members, that I can see them in a certain way that only I can see them, like they can see me in a certain way that only they can see me, and so that appreciation and kind of acceptance of who I am is very strong in these days that I've been with L'Arche. Yeah. And I mean, you Eddie gave presentation where very, very succinctly and very clearly put certain aspects of L'Arche in context, and you can see how living the gospel is a reality, because at every moment we have the chance to live the gospel. But my context, I guess, would be slightly different, because although I was raised a Catholic, I lost my faith when I was 14, 15. I rediscovered it in 2008, but not through Catholicism, through another avenue. And I don't have all the richness of the gospel stories and the richness of the meaning and the truth and the various interpretations that you can see in everyday life at my fingertips, and I'm just relearning that now, or seeing it in its truer light in the last few months when I returned to Catholicism. So my context, yeah, it's from non-duality, which a lot of Catholic thinkers recognize is a valid path, like Richard Rohr. I'm interested in his work. But at the end of the day, I think it's the same. I think it's well, yeah, I think it's the same. And I don't know if I could try and summarize my spiritual approach to L'Arche, then yeah, it's something to do with, well, with growth, and it comes through suffering, and it comes through the joys, and it comes through sharing, and I guess it comes through honesty. So I'm learning to be more honest about my suffering, about my joy, and how to share that with others and find my voice. Yeah, so that would be my response to, and my offering to this webinar. So thanks for the attention.
Well, thank you, Ian. And Oh, thank you so much, Ian. And just to say, really, as I said in my presentation, just as I was very much enriched by coming into contact, firstly with Christians from other traditions to my Catholic tradition, over time I became very enriched by coming into contact with those of other faith traditions, and also, and particularly in L'Arche, but not just in L'Arche, by those people who haven't come from a conventional, shall we say, faith background. That also has been a tremendous richness, and there's a really, I think, exciting place of dialogue there for L'Arche, for the church, for society. A really exciting and essential place of dialogue, I would say. Could I invite perhaps Colin or Lise to come in at this point?
Yeah, well.
Thank you, Lise. I'll just click
yeah.
on you there. Yeah. Hi, Lise.
Yeah, I suppose it's a good moment for me to come in, having come to L'Arche exactly from this untraditional, non-faith background. 17 years ago, coming from a post-Soviet Union country, which being brought up in a non-religious environment, because that was the only environment possible. But I think L'Arche has been a great place for me to explore my own spirituality, and really, really to come to understand much better, or kind of much truer sense what that could mean. Because when I first became fascinated with religion and faith, quite typically to me, I decided I'll study it at the university, and I realized that by studying theology, I was no closer to understanding really what this faith thing is all about. I had a much better theoretical understanding, but not really emotional or personal understanding. And although after these years in L'Arche, I have still come to the point where I wouldn't sign up to any specific faith. I think L'Arche is a truly spiritual place for quite a few reasons, but I wanted to particularly mention is for the reasons that it is indeed incredibly open and welcoming and non-judgmental for people with any kind of difference. And secondly, because it is a truly a place where growth, a personal growth and person-centeredness is not just a slogan, like it is pretty fashionable in a world of care and support for quite a few years now. But indeed it goes, it encompasses everyone in a community. That, if you're not here to grow, then kind of I would always question in a way, why are you here? Because that's, there isn't many better places in my limited experience that you could be. So, and there is something about that. I think I was quite touched to hear Ian speak, because you would have thought that he's been here for a bit longer than 4 days, the way he summed up some of the things. And it also resonated with me when he said it's something about that honesty or authenticity. And I think it is true, there is something about the people with learning disabilities presence that encourages me to try to be more true to who I am, rather than present something what I would think the world would like to see. And I remember in my very first year in L'Arche, one of the people with learning disabilities said to me in one afternoon, you are the most beautiful and most pathetic person in the whole world. And I was greatly touched by it, because I hadn't really thought about it, or I hadn't, you know, she kind of made it possible that you could be beautiful and pathetic at the same time. You know, I had only focused on being beautiful, whereas she, you know, thought that it was exactly wonderful that I was most beautiful and most pathetic. So, and yeah, you know, she was completely right. That's exactly me. Yeah, so yeah, so I think, you know, L'Arche has a spiritual significance way above, you know, a denominational boundaries, really, and it has a bigger human significance as well. And also in my first year in L'Arche, I remember going to listen to Jean Vanier talk, and one of the people in the audience asked a question. They said, you know, what is more important in L'Arche, in a way? You know, I'm not a Christian, neither am I a believer, but, you know, people with learning disabilities are very important to me, or, you know, I believe in people with learning disabilities. And without the blink of, you know, without the moments of pause, Jean Vanier said, well, that's what matters, you know. The belief in a human being is greater than the belief in God. So you're in the right place. And I found that also incredibly inspirational, that somebody with us, you know, whose whole journey is so tied to the faith journey, and that has been such a great motivation, could just come out with an answer like that without it being kind of somehow scripted or fake. So yeah, so I think that's probably enough of my contribution.
Well, thank you, Lise. Would you like to come in, Colin?
Okay, so first of all, can you hear me clearly?
I can. Can Ian and Lise hear Colin?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologise, I can't get my camera working, but maybe that's a good thing if I haven't had the makeup artist this morning. So I'm really touched by your various sharings, and I think that they remind me of why I originally went to L'Arche in London in the 1980s. I was another person on a spiritual journey. I'd not come from a religious family, though I'd been christened a Methodist, and I'd done part of my accountancy training, and I can remember walking along the streets in London on the way to work and seeing homeless people and thinking, whose side am I on? Whose side am I on? I'm going to work in the eyes of many in the Temple of Mammon, and then there's Lazarus, you know, lying at the side of the street. And I got to a point where I just packed up. I stopped my training. I left, and I, by chance, came across a book by Cardinal Basil Hume called Searching for God, which told a Methodist like me, who'd never really been to church, that monks and nuns and things like this still existed. So it introduced me to a new world of Christianity, and I started to go to various churches. And at the same time, I went along to see the local parish priest, because I was drawn in the direction of Catholicism for reasons I won't go into. And I you know, did this for a while, and I ended up seeing a Jesuit and saying, well, you know, I've been to a couple of monasteries now, and the silence is wonderful. I come out on a different place. This is as near to heaven that I can get, just sitting in silence. And he said, well, Colin, if you think you're going in that direction, they're not going to let you in for a couple of years. So why don't you go and see my friend Catherine Hall, who was director of L'Arche in London? And, you know, because you don't want to go back to work, you want to do something righteous. So I went along to see Catherine in London, and I ended joining the London L'Arche community. I gave away my possessions, and I was determined to live the gospel life and work for the poor and such like. And I had probably the best time of my life, but also the hardest time of my life. I found it incredibly difficult to be a white, middle-class, untrained, idealistic chap dealing with challenging people. And I'm not talking about the core members. In the end, it's the assistants who were more challenging than the core members. And we were quite a bunch, you know, pretty well every person there was thinking that they were going to the priesthood or the monastery or the convent or, you know, something religious. And it wasn't only Christians. When I used to go downstairs to the prayer room in the Sycamore, we had the Buddhist icons in one corner because we had Buddhists. We had the Christian icons in another corner. And we were very clear that we were a kind of a place of spiritual meeting. And that was part of the prophetic function of L'Arche. The core members would not necessarily understand these nice intellectual distinctions between the denominations and this, that, and the other. And there was a message there for us and for society, that the pain of separation, prayer, they shall all be one. And we can extend that. We can take Vatican statements like Nostra Aetate, which recognizes in the 60s and 70s, for the first time probably, the value and wisdom in other traditions. The fact that God is working everywhere, not just through this church or this denomination or that denomination, or even this way of thinking or that way of thinking. And I've never forgotten that, but it's taken me years and years to try and put a framework around the experiences that I had in L'Arche. But because I think if you come as a house assistant, they're so intense, unless you're a saint already, it's going to take a long time to make sense of them. So I'm kind of turning this round backwards. I've started with kind of some of the complexity of what L'Arche stood for then, and I think it still stands for today. But I wonder whether we're quite as explicit about it as we used to be. In other words, do the assistants in the houses or in the workshop or the volunteers appreciate that they're building the kingdom, if I explain this in overtly Christian terms? And I'm going to use Christian terms because I'm a Catholic, but I'm open to the same way of thinking in other traditions, in Buddhist tradition or Hindu tradition or Jain tradition or whatever. It's about being a witness to something which is a sign which goes against what society does. And that's an outward thing and it's an inward thing. It's an outward challenge and it's an inward challenge. So why am I doing it? Why am I doing it now? I'm doing it now because I'm a secular Carmelite. I'm a member of the Discalced Carmelite secular order. And part of our charism is that prayer becomes works. St. Teresa said that the point of prayer is good works. So, like the prayer of the church so many times a day, I have an hour of silence every night. And the rest of life, for me, it's like being on permanent retreat. And out of that comes the kind of calling, if you like, to live what our order calls a life of evangelical poverty. And that means many things, but one of the things that I'll pick out is a commitment to justice. And because we're very Catholic, we would measure justice with the Beatitudes. And I'm not going to go through all of those, but I'll just pick out the little bit about in Matthew chapter 5 about justice. I think there's two of them in there. There's one which is blessed are those who hunger and thirst for uprightness. And there's another one in there, I can't find it at the moment, where he talks about the fact that the justice of the world is not the justice of God. And part of our role in L'Arche is to do this contra thing against society in terms of these Beatitudes. And that brings us back to the prophetic role. The only other thing I'd say is that there's quite a lot of L'Arche when you're a house assistant, which is about the nitty-gritty of doing the washing up and the spirituality of the sink, I suppose you could call it. And I've picked up this morning on the way up the house a little book called The Practice of the Presence of God, which was written by a Carmelite lay brother in the century. And I don't think he's a saint, but I think he's recognised as a person of some spiritual authority. And he talks about the way to God being through faith and love, which is very Carmelite. It's very St. John of the Cross. It's not intellectual. There are two roads. Your feet are led by faith and, your guide is love, kind of thing. And he says, I turn my little omelette in the pan for the love of God. When I can do nothing else, it is enough to have picked up a straw for the love of God. People look for ways of learning how to love God. They hope to attain it by I know not how many different practices. Is it not a much shorter and direct way to do everything for the love of God, and to make use of all the tasks one's lot in life demands, to show him that love and to maintain his presence within by the communion of our heart with his? And I love that, because for me that sums up so much of what being in L'Arche is all about. It's resting in a loving presence, doing really ordinary things. So I guess I'll stop there before Eddie cuts me off.
Thank you, Colin. I'm just writing down that last quote of yours. Ordinary things. Oh, thank you so much. We've got just a couple of minutes left. And just as a way of starting to sum up, it's clear that for all four of us, while the expression of our faith has been very different, we're from very different backgrounds, and our current expression also is very different. It's clear that faith is absolutely central to all four of us in how we see L'Arche and our involvement with L'Arche. And I, one of the questions that you put, Colin, which struck me, was really, are we explicit enough about that? If it's so important, to the extent that somebody has written a PhD and is presenting that next week and is saying, this actually, the place of faith in an organisation actually helps to create better outcomes for people with learning disabilities. Yes, that's Colin. Yeah, go for it. I'm going to bring Colin in for a small comment.
One observation that I've made in the Rainbow when I go and cook on a Tuesday is that sometimes I end up in discussion with assistants about God, the universe and everything. And there's a real thirst for it in the people there. And I don't go there as an evangelist, I just go in the kitchen and get the meatballs ready or something. I really don't go there with an agenda of trying to get people to talk about things. But the question comes up, and I've been really struck by assistants wanting almost to kind of make sense of what's going on and to know more. So that's just my little observation that I offer from Rainbow.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Colin. Lisa, I wonder if I could put that question to you. Do you think we're explicit enough in L'Arche around this question of the importance of faith?
Yeah, can I come in?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. I think we are not.
Hmm.
I think we are increasingly, I can kind of relate to L'Arche that Colin has just spoken about. And I've seen its slow loss of confidence, perhaps, in articulating the importance. So I think we are not explicit enough. I think there is a real, for better or worse, putting it, identity crisis between the different dimensions of the community, of L'Arche, between the care provision, between the community, and between the faith or spirituality. And I think it is particularly in my experience, particularly the spiritual or faith side, that gets articulated less than the two other factors. So it is a pertinent time to ask the questions about the community, but particularly about faith and spirituality.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Lise. We're going to have to finish off now, and I think I've possibly already got the question for my second webinar, which could be how can we be more explicit about the faith dimension of L'Arche, more confident and more explicit. So there could be a second webinar on the way soon. Thank you so much to you, Colin, Ian and Lise. For me, this has been a real pleasure, and I've been really inspired. So thank you so much to you all. And I'm going to click the red button now which says stop broadcast, and I'm going to see each of you in the flesh during the day at various times, and I'll look forward to that very much as well. All the best, and wishing you all a really good day. Bye.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.